Hi, I'm James Brookes, and welcome to From the Factory Floor, a conversational podcast about all things startup and tech, brought to you by the folks at Thestartupfactory.tech.
And welcome back to From the Factory Floor, where we've actually managed to rope Ian back in again. That's 2 weeks on a trot.
Yeah, I must have done something right last week.
Something right or something wrong, I'll let you decide which way around. And,
or that nobody else's event.
And we're also delighted to be joined again by Nyree. Hi, Nyree.
Hi, James. Hi, Ian.
Hi, Nyree. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very well. We've got the Queen of Marketing on here, James. So this will be a good one.
Well, you did spoil last week that obviously after our chat about sales, we're actually going to talk about marketing. So I think it kind of makes sense.
So you had to have me.
Yeah. Well, we chose to do a marketing podcast, which is why we chose to have you with us. So,
all right, thanks.
So, I mean, I guess it's probably the best place to start because I think a lot of people have ideas around what marketing is and what marketing isn't. So, I guess rather than me and Ian talking about it, Nyree, I think it's as the expert in the virtual room.
Mm-hmm.
So what actually is marketing, especially to startups?
What is marketing? Well, traditionally, marketing is promoting your business or your service or your products to your customer groups. But obviously, that's very, very simple-minded. And I think the evolution of social channels and things like personal branding and founder branding, which we'll talk about a bit later, kind of really encompasses marketing into the way your business, your products and your services are positioned across any channel in front of your customers. And whether that's customers that you're buying that are going to buy from you now or people in the future or stakeholders or investors, it kind of covers everything really. So the other thing I would say, I know you asked me what is marketing, but I'll tell you what isn't marketing, because I always say this when I'm talking to people. Marketing isn't telling people what you want to tell them. So you'll often, if there are any marketers listening to this, they'll probably feel my pain. But marketing isn't, we want people to know what our values are, or we want people to know why we do this. That's not marketing. You're just telling people what you want to tell them. That's essentially broadcast. We want to tell them about our business. Actually, marketing is much more engaging and two-way than that. So it's about listening to what your customers, key audiences, stakeholders are talking about and joining in that conversation.
Well, I guess that really ties into what we said last week about sales, around things are much more conversational now, much more two-way rather than just, it's not the hard sales of this is why you need the thing. It's very much consultative.
Yeah, I think which comes across with the way that Nyree talked about it and for me, it kind of captures one of the essences of a startup marketing plan is passion. Nyree's got passion for marketing, what it means, why we need it, how you go about it. Obviously, the evolution and development of digital marketing has kind of really come to the fore, and that enables you to have a reach with content and moves the traditional boundaries. So, but I mean, I think startup marketing has to be passion led. And a conviction, and we'll come on to that, as Nyree said, around the founder later on in the session.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I think especially when it comes to the founder, because, like I say, it's very passion-led, and I guess it's one of the things is about a lot of these things should be very founder-led. We said it about the sales last week. And almost focusing both on their personal brand, which I know is something that we've spoken to Ben at Procure about a lot, but also about the brand. So obviously you mentioned there around how brands need to be authentic. So how does a startup, when it's potentially quite small and new, really try and position itself and get that authenticity?
I think it's one of the three key things really in a startup business model, and this is where what we push to our startup founders is that marketing is not fluffy. It really is quite tangible, and as I said earlier, with the digital marketing, you can really get a reach and establish your brand positioning and what you're about. I think it's where are you in the current market? Why are you different from your competitors? There's a lot of what you stand for and the values, which I think is very important. People still do buy from people, and with the founder orientation, that's really important. But the brand positioning, having a clear target roadmap, defined user personas around product market fit. I think there's some real tangible stuff around brand positioning. The kind of communication of that and the messaging and the logos, the look and feel are really, really important. But for me, there's some real tangible stuff around branding that a startup needs to get right.
No, it's one of the things we always address when we do any tech products is who are the target users. And I know we discussed it in the sales and knowing who you're selling to, but also knowing how to reach out to them and how really what they're looking for in solving a particular issue. I mean, obviously pricing them is, like we said last week, almost the last thing you want to be addressing, but you do have to have some sort of strategy around how you're going to price yourself to both when you have that conversation and whether you make people aware of how you're pricing and what your strategy is towards that. I don't know if that's something that either of you've got any sort of particular opinion on.
Well, I think we've both got opinions on it, haven't we? I think just going back to what Ian said around being authentic and being you. And in terms of pricing, you obviously have to look at where the market is and what the price points are. And there's always a really good exercise around competitor analysis and mapping where you're operating in that market and looking at pricing and sense testing the pricing as well. But equally, I think the thing that you've got to go back to is being authentic and what are people getting from you and what makes you different, and therefore does the pricing reflect that. So I think a lot of startups, we certainly have conversations, Ian, don't we, where they go in too cheap. There's that real kind of thing around getting your first 5 or 10 sales in and selling it at a really low point, but then you're in a race to the bottom. And how can you build your business and scale from that? But equally, you don't want to go into really high top end of the market when you've not built up that brand equity and that brand credibility yet. I think the other thing I would say in a lot of this is pricing is important, but it's not the most important thing because you can tweak pricing. You can't, you can tweak messaging, but you can't really tweak branding. You can't tweak who you are if you're being authentic. So the branding and the marketing and the content strategy and all that is a much longer game. So you want to get that right. And some pieces you'll do will hit your audience straight away and be really successful in some way. But ultimately you can tweak price and you can test it and you can dress it up as well in terms of like an entry level price or a one-off offer price, or this is a price for the first 10 people. You can test stuff as a pilot opportunity and price it according to that. A summer saver, that type of thing. So you can move the dial up and down on pricing a bit easier than you can with everything else. And we've certainly had a lot of startups that it takes a while, I think, doesn't it, to kind of really know what your pricing model is, and they test things out and get feedback and tweak it, etc. I don't think many go in knowing bang on what the pricing's going to be, but you definitely need to have an eye on what other people are offering and know what your value is.
And I think the key words there is value, Nyree. I think the startups are an entity that's done something innovative. It's created something that's new in the market or is different, and therefore it has value, and therefore don't just price it cheap to get your first customer. And there's a lot of temptation and drive of founders and urgency to make that first sale without doing a number of things. The first thing is segmentation. Really understand your target market. Is it a one-off transaction? Is it a monthly transaction? Is it an annual thing? How often will people buy your service or your product? And understand how often customers will come to you, how often they'll come and buy on a repeat basis. So segmentation is a key thing, and you only get that through testing. Equally, I think you look at things like Salesforce, they have different price points for different offerings, and think about bundling, think about packaging, what is in your service or product offering. And I think that's important. And there certainly isn't a one size fits all. I'm mindful of a startup we all know that had an opportunity with a corporate and priced that at £10,000. The corporate came back and said, no, I've not quite got the budget for that. So they went back at 2,500, and the corporate still said, no, I've not got the price budget for that. And they went back a third time at 500. Now, that totally undermines the value, the proposition, the innovation. So you've got to be very, very careful about how quickly you do settle on your price. And to your point, Nyree, I think it's essential you kind of recognise why you're different in the market, and you go with a value-led price that explains the benefit to the customer in terms of solving their problem, not just that you are different. And the final point is loads of startups produce financial models with revenue projections, but the driver of a revenue projection, of course, is volume times price. And without really validating your price, then you're not going to be able to validate your revenue projection. So there's lots of subtlety around using marketing for discovery and learning, as well as getting traction in the market.
I think one of the pricing strategies that I often refer startups back to is HubSpot's. So they do a startup discount, don't they, for our startups, which is 90%. And I think going back to your strategy and looking at your vertical markets as well. So who are you trying to target there? So is it sport industry? Is it education industry? What's the proposition for them? Because it will be different for each one. So HubSpot obviously have their sales package, they have an enterprise package. They didn't want to neglect startups because they need startups using HubSpot, because as they grow, they'll then grow the revenue with them. So you have got the ability to have that 90% off. You don't get everything that you need, but you get what a startup would need. And there's definitely a few of our startups, isn't there, that are working in that way now, looking at packaging pricing. So actually there is the entry level, but that's more self-serve. They have the gold pricing, or kind of gold package as well, and who are we targeting there? And knowing that selling 2 or 3 of those actually takes them to the break-even point, actually takes the pressure off then, and you can get a bit more creative with some of the other stuff you want to do. So HubSpot is always a good one to look at, and I am always a quite big fan of packaging pricing that way.
Yeah.
No, I think it's what we mentioned with sales, where I think it also means you're very clear on what you're actually offering people, because it's something we said last week, Ian, was you can't be all things to all men. And if you've got such a wide, diverse thing, and you potentially solve quite a lot of problems, I can imagine that makes your messaging really hard to actually try and target that. Whereas if you've got select packages, whether it's aimed at startups, whether it's aimed at corporates, whether it's aimed at purely a B2C model, I think if you've got those very distinct packages and this is what we can offer to you, it really helps target your messaging. And then obviously, I think we'll come on to talking about channels in a little bit, of how to actually then target those packages to the people who it should be in front of.
Yeah, I mean, just final thing from me on pricing before we move on. As Nyree said, HubSpot's a great source of information. They do some great startup marketing knowledge takeaways. But also go and look at some of the really successful startups. I'm always mindful that when PayPal came to the market, they offered a $10 credit as an incentive. So your marketing has got to be playful, creative, impactful, but also actually offer an incentive to pull people in and get that initial sign up. So go and look at the bigger, more successful tech startups and look at how they came to market. And Apple are a great brand. How they purposefully led innovation, and look how they launched the iPod. 10,000 songs in your pocket and stuff like that. There's lots of creativity that you can leverage into not just your pricing strategy, but also your overall marketing.
I think it's always a good point. Like I say, once you've got all that and you've got what your messaging is, packages, you've learned from, let's face it, like you said, Apple was one of the best in terms of how they led innovation and really made that their key message that they want to say, how innovative the iPod was. And I said iPhone, I forgot they even did the iPod before that, to be honest. But I guess once you've got all that, and one of the things that I guess has become more interesting over the last couple of years is actually choosing your channel. Like previously, there was billboards and TV ads, that sort of thing. But also with the growth of social media and user-generated content, I mean, how would you approach trying to work out what your core channel that you're going to reach your core users to actually push these packages to is?
I mean, I think I think there's a degree of common sense to it. I think a lot of startups feel that they need to be on every channel. If I hear one more B2B business tell me that they need to be on TikTok, I think my head's going to explode. Because now this week everything is about TikTok, and don't get me wrong, TikTok is a hugely valuable platform. I think it's just overtaken YouTube, hasn't it, as the number one search engine or one of the top search engines, and people are spending hours on there. But just because somebody's spending hours on there doesn't mean that it's the same as growing your business. So I think, questions I would be asking is, are you B2B or B2C? If you're B2B, LinkedIn is going to be a really strong channel for you, and founder-led branding is going to be a really strong channel. Is it professional services, or is it more kind of lifestyle services that you're offering? In which case Instagram is. Does it lend itself? Is it a highly confidential product or service, for example, medical industry, or counseling, something like that? In which case it's going to be very difficult to kind of showcase some of the conversations and content that would happen, which again means possibly like LinkedIn might be more relevant. Instagram obviously is hugely growing, successful platform, and we've got several businesses, and I know one very close to my heart, Financial, that have grown their business through Instagram, but that was the right channel for them. And if you ask them, they will tell you it was very, very difficult. A lot of blood, sweat and tears. Overnight success doesn't happen on those channels, and you have to live and breathe it and be on it. So I think if you're going to make a commitment about growing your business through these channels, it's going to take a lot of work, and eventually kind of paying for boosting posts and things like that. But a lot of organic content, it really works if it's your face, or you're talking, you become the face of the brand. So are you comfortable doing that? So there's a lot to consider, but I certainly don't ever think that there's a kind of one size fits all social media strategy for businesses. And equally, there isn't this urgency to be on all of those channels, because once you're on all of those channels, you've then got to create content for all of those channels, which becomes quite difficult, and you have to tweak that content and change that content. So my suggestion would be, all businesses should have a LinkedIn page, and all founders need to have a personal brand that sits on LinkedIn. That's a no-brainer. And then look at what your other equal first choice or your second choice channel is going to be. And as you grow and your social media kind of comfort evolves, you might want to then look at things like Twitter or Facebook as well. Obviously Instagram and Facebook are connected, so that does make life a little bit easier. You might want to outsource that, but you don't need to be on all of these channels. And I don't want people thinking that they haven't looked at TikTok yet, so therefore they're missing an opportunity. That opportunity may come, but if you're staying true to the purpose of your business and your key messages and where your audiences are, you can be really comfortable that you don't need to be on those channels at the moment. You're in the right place, having the right conversations.
Some really, really good thoughts there, Nyree. And just to complement that, I think now we're back post-COVID, face-to-face engagements through events, or the good old-fashioned "shall we meet for a coffee" shouldn't be underestimated. This blended approach which you're advocating around timing, messaging, what the right market-facing channel is really important. I think what's hopefully coming across in this podcast is the need to have access to marketing expertise as part of your startup. I think we're all enthusiastic commentators at one thing or another, but certainly with the work you've been doing with Tom on FreeUp, where we've spent over 18 months defining the product, the proposition, pilots, testing, how we actually launched that. You've added some real insight as you've just highlighted. So I think I'd say to every founder, don't just think marketing is just getting out there and whacking a few things on social media. I think be much more thoughtful and structured, and get someone who's got marketing expertise into your team.
Yeah, I think the other bit I would say on that is get somebody that has got marketing expertise with that kind of startup and entrepreneurial mentality. So we had it really stayed with me actually. We had a guy, James, in Tea Tech and Toast, one of the drop-ins we did to sales and marketing drop-in a few weeks ago, and really lovely guy, brilliant idea, really passionate about it. Was saving for a deposit for a house and decided he was going to put it all into this business, and had done loads of the work for it. And then he had the wind knocked out of his sails a bit because he had some feedback from an agency, marketing agency, that had said, or I think it was a marketing agency that said, you need at least, was it 50,000 users on the platform or something, absolutely ridiculous number. And he came to us and he was saying, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And we were like, 50,000 in 5 years, maybe, or 3 years, maybe that's what you're looking at. I said, but for now, I would be happy with 100 for your testing phase, maximum 100, 200. If you think about some of the businesses we work with, where we're onboarding businesses and clients, you're looking at around 100, aren't you? So, and once we talked him through that and the reasoning, he was really excited and passionate again about it. But actually, had he not come to us, and we're not working with him, well, not at the moment, we were just giving him the advice, but I thought he'd gone somewhere that probably was really reputable in terms of marketing, but didn't understand how startups work, didn't understand how you test and iterate and what the process is, and the amount of pivots that startups go through as well. And I think the other thing is, traditional agencies will tell you that you need to have this big 20, 30,000 pound brand presentation. You need to know your brand. You do need to know your brand, but you don't need to have a hugely expensive process to get to that point. Most startups don't have that money, and if they do have that money, it needs to go into other areas. So you need to do what you need to do to be at the right standard, and buy in some of that expertise. But I would definitely say, somebody that has walked in those shoes and understands and will help you spend money where you need to, but not waste it, particularly if your business is going to pivot 3 times in the first 12 months, which is completely to be expected for startups. And then all of a sudden you've got a really outdated brand that you spent £25,000 on. So, choose your expertise wisely, I would say.
And I think when you start looking at...
Sorry, Jim. People also get really wound up on they've got to have a 10-page, 20-page website, all singing, all dancing, imagery, narrative, the lot. Whereas just get a landing page and just have a sign-up process. I'm interested in hearing about more, just to kind of start to create that community, collecting data. I think it's good advice, Nyree. It's kind of a minimum viable version of a website, just to announce a launch and you're there. But your messaging will change, your kind of positioning will change. Tom's a great example. COVID made us change because we couldn't actually get into premises that we needed to install the device. So we went outdoor. And now, as you know, the website is absolutely nothing like what it was 18 months ago.
And it's still going to change if I get my way.
Yeah. Sorry, James, I spoke over you there.
No, I think you kind of covered off what I was going to say anyway, to be honest. So I guess, especially with all of this as well, when you start talking about your website, that your website can't, like you say, just be a 15-page behemoth that just sits there and you're expecting walls of text and fancy infographics. I think it's one of the things that you mentioned, Nyree, around, obviously there is a business brand and a personal brand. And obviously I know, Ian, you're a fan of writing a blog. For anyone who hasn't seen Ian's weekly Monday morning blogs, they're definitely worth a read. But having different types of content and having those appeal to the different sort of customer segments that you've got, whether that's something like a podcast or a blog, and having all that available through your website, is there what would you guys suggest in terms of people approaching different types of content, and what's probably the best approach to trying to really focus your efforts?
Go on, Ian, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think what we said, actually, in the future, we'll actually look at a podcast that's focusing really exclusively on content, because I think, as you said, James, aligning your target audience with the channel and the type of content really needs thinking through. But I think it's almost like, what do you enjoy doing? And how do you get your passion? How do you get your ideas? How do you get your persona and your personality over there? Because I think content steps into this founder-led. It's an old phrase, isn't it? But people buy from people, and therefore you want to create a connection very early on, because you're asking early adopters and users to kind of trust you. And I think from a startup's point of view, if you haven't got paying customers, you've got to create that relationship and create that trust. And therefore, pushing out a personality, being easy to do business with, knowing your stuff and positioning that is really, really important. So I enjoy the blogs, and like I say, I do a weekly blog. Some are rambling, some are more thoughtful, some are more structured, but hopefully it gives a flavour for the spirit of what the Startup Factory is in terms of who we are as people, what would it be like to do business with. And I think that's an important thing for a founder, that don't be all things to everybody day one. Don't try and be something you're not, because I think a lot of customers are interested on your personal journey and what you've done to achieve what you've done. And until you get in front of them to have that conversation, which goes back to the sales conversation piece around the critical conversations last week, James, don't get into selling mode and don't confuse marketing with selling. Marketing is about building a relationship, getting in your personality, getting your product known out there. And the content, I would argue, but we'll come on to this on a separate session, the content is what you're good at to make the most impact.
I suppose the point though as well, actually, around your personal brand, I know it's something that, like I said, Bennett Prochura mentioned a lot of, your personal style and how you approach whatever type of content you really want to do. How aligned do you think your personal brand has to be to your business brand? Because obviously using someone like Tom, who's so scientific and analytical at FreeUp, really speaks to the brand and how he's approached it. Whereas some founders might have quite a different, quirky, almost provocative style in terms of their personal brand, which can be quite different to how the actual startup wants their brand to be.
I think this is something people get really worried about, and I've worked for a lot of businesses and done a lot of training on social media and personal branding, and people get absolutely terrified about being trolled or harming their business for something that they're going to write. And the thing I always say is, first of all, you're not going to kill anyone with a social media post, okay? And you might not quite be on message, or it's not quite what we would advise, but you're not really going to, unless you're going to go in with something horrendously offensive, you're not going to do any huge amount of damage. And people want to see you, and I think to a degree the business page is more professional, and would be written from a style point of view, would be written in third person. And the personal page obviously can be a bit warmer and show personality. Now obviously you want to see the connection with the two, but actually the types of founder pages I really enjoy reading, or the posts I really enjoy reading, is like, I suppose, showing the bit of the warts and all journeys of being a founder, the glamour, but also the tears and the frustrations, because there is a lot out there around, startup, this founder journeys, all kind of champagne and caviar and award ceremonies, and it's actually a lot of blood, sweat and tears, and where people kind of go back to reminding themselves why they're doing it. Now you do want to obviously have the link to it, but you can afford to be a bit warmer and a bit more personal. And if it's part of your brand to drop in the odd F-bomb, I don't think anyone's going to, boycott your business because of it. But equally, you do need to be mindful around being professional and not offending people, particularly if you are going to comment on something that's potentially quite controversial or newsworthy. I would probably say, think twice around that. But essentially what they want to see is the real person. People buy from people. I'm sure you covered that last week as well. But if you think about the Startup Factory, when people come in and they see us and they talk to us, they will go home and tell their friends and family, I went to this really cool business. The guy that runs it, the guy that owns it is da 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 da, da, and it will always be about the person that they sat with, rather than talk about what the business actually does. They then get onto the business, but it's always about the people. When we meet founders, we talk about, had these guys in the businesses, they're really interesting, they come from this background, and we'll always talk about the founders rather than we actually come onto the business model a lot later, don't we? So we're naturally more interested in people. I think your personal brand is stronger than a business brand, and worth putting the effort into.
Yeah, I think there's lots of really good stuff there. I think the couple of things I always like, think different. The Steve Jobs, the Apple, because it kind of just raised the expectation as to what they were going to do, and they had this dramatic reveal, didn't they? The turtleneck, and I know we haven't all got the budget to do that, but that kind of brand recognition of a quirky, innovative, driven individual. The tech tea and toast, Nyree, which you developed for us, it's humorous. We use the slices of toast, the pictures of the toaster, and it kind of brings up an image of great value, but they're actually not overly serious.
Just informal, isn't it?
Yeah, because we are practitioners, and I think getting that over is how the vocabulary you use is really important. And if I just end on 3 examples from people that we've worked with. So you look at Bankify, who are aimed very clearly at their target market, and that their credibility and the content that they put out is thought-provoking. It's very much related to these are the problems in the market and this is how we can help you. And that is consistent, I think. And the ability that Mark has got in that marketing to pivot to different segments is clear, but the messaging is important. Nevo are a bit more provocative, not necessarily personality-led, because it's still financial services. So it's about creating trust, and getting new tech into financial services is hard. But Nevo's marketing is all about, these are real problems that your customers are suffering from. So the Nevo marketing is aimed at their customers, which is kind of quite a thought-provoking way of going about it. And then you reference Financial, and I just love the kind of quirky, outrageous, had a bad morning getting the kids to school, and how they kind of put their own personal challenges while working at a startup. And I think there's a blend of those 3. If you go and look at how they use their marketing to build credibility, positioning, is really interesting. That there isn't a one size fits all, but I think have a plan, stick to it, execute it, and measure it, and work out what works.
And be authentic, that works for them because it's part of who they are. What works for Mark is part of and it actually, interestingly, as Bankify has grown and grown, Mark's social media profile has stepped back, probably because it's not as important to him anymore. I'm sure he probably would like to have more time to do it, but obviously he's grown a hugely successful business. But he doesn't need to do that founder-led content anymore because Bankify is now in like super growth stage. So this is all aimed at starting out and start up and getting yourself known and getting yourself on the scene. But there will come a point where you can take a step back or bring somebody in to support you with it.
Yeah.
I think the authenticity is always the thing, and it's why we always say everything should be very founder-led, whether it's your marketing, whether it's your sales. Because eventually, whether that changes over time and how, obviously, you bring more people into your team, I think, especially at the start, it being about how you're approaching things, because like we did say it last week, we said it today, everything people buy from people, you're selling to other people. So if you can actually just put your personality across, people will buy into you in the same way that when founders come to us, we buy into them, because often that's all they have at that stage is them and their idea and their passion. So like I said, always be authentic and really put your own stamp on who you are, but obviously with the caveats we mentioned. So I'm just conscious of the time, and I know there's quite a few other topics like partnerships that we haven't come on to, which is something that obviously now you've covered a lot while you've been working with at TSF, and obviously to great success recently. But I mean, just to summarise, obviously the approach in terms of defining your strategy, actually creating the channels that you think are best, and measuring your outcomes, which I know you need to know what you're doing works. Is there any last takeaways either of you'd like to give to any of the founders that are listening to this in terms of approaching their marketing from the outset?
Yeah,
I think. Go on. Of course, we have.
I think it is. As I kind of said, the thing I've learned really working with Nyree is that marketing isn't fluffy. It really is a tangible part of your business model, and therefore invest time and effort in developing a strategy, working out the necessary messaging and the channels. It really, really is important. But then don't get fussy about it. Just kind of look at it as testing your market, testing your communication, and working out your audience. But you need to invest in marketing as an integral part, and probably start your marketing 6 months before you launch. That kind of get a landing page, get a sign up, start getting out there and building an audience.
And claim your social channels as well.
Yeah, that's definitely something we always advise, isn't it? As soon as you've settled on a name, go and claim your social channels. So make sure that you've got them. And just Ian's last point was what I was going to say. So we do see founders that, particularly if they're building a tech product, think they're so focused on the build of the tech product and all of those kind of conversations and decisions that happen that they think the marketing can happen. Okay, so the MVP is built now, so let's think about the marketing. It's too late. You've got to get some roots in, know who your audiences are, do your segmentation, test the marketing, building your audience profiles if you're going to be paying for any paid media activity, building your social channels, your personal brand. So it has to be done at the same time as your tech, not with a huge amount of focus, but a few hours a week. It's too late if you're waiting until everything's built and you're ready to go to market. You're going to be a step behind, at least one step behind.
No, I think that's great advice from both of you. So obviously, like I said, I think we're just about coming up on time. So thank you very much both for joining us.
Yeah,
Ian, we might give you a week off at some point.
Keep driving me hard, fella.
Maybe not. And obviously, I think we'll probably pick up more on marketing in the future, especially around stuff like partnerships, which can be really important going forward. But no, thank you, Ian. And
Thanks,
thank you very
James.
much, Nyree.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, see you soon.
Bye.
See you soon. And thank you very much for everyone listening.
Bye. Thanks, James.
I think that just about wraps things up here. If you have any thoughts or questions on anything we said today, get in touch, whether that be through our Twitter @RealTSF or email at hello@StartupFactory.tech, or feel free to drop in for a coffee and a chat. As ever, thanks for listening.